This Foxy bro was Mike Afton after all, and Crying Child was his little brother, just like it was supposed to all those years ago. What is up, SmackNPie here, and welcome back to another FNAF video, albeit after a long time. I'm finally coming back to FNAF Theories, and today, thanks to Matpat of the game Theorists, I got motivated to do a FNAF video. Scott's FNAF Fazbear Frights next installment, that's already been out, Step Closer, released last month, and ever since I've been waiting for the physical edition in my nearest store because I love getting physical edition of these books, but I couldn't wait for this one, especially after his video. And also note, I'm only covering one specific story from the book. Everything else isn't relevant for this video's topic, as we're here for Mike and Foxy. Now, last time when I did a theory for Five Nights at Freddy's, Michael and Bite Victim, I called this story Afton Family's Story as Part 1, with Michael, Bite Victim, William, baby, and an unknown mother. Back then I said that Mrs. Afton has a little to no impact in what happens afterward of her absence in the story, because only Henry's wife's impact was shown clearly in the Fourth Closet and other books as well as games, but here it seems Michael's behavior was like that because of the mother. Either way, ever since then many theories came forward. One of the biggest one was Dream Theory, Mike being the Bite Victim thanks to a survival logbook, as Fazbear was supposedly talking to him because it was his name in the book. Nonetheless, why are we here today? Well, we're here for Foxy, Michael, and Bite Victim, mainly for Mike and Foxy. Step Closer, the book is all about Foxy, diving deep into how he affected the FNAF universe and people in it. In the new book, which you should be getting all of them, we get to learn the story from new characters' perspective, although I will say to this day my favorites are the first and the third, but this one is really good for lore. We learn the story from two new characters, Pete and Chuck's perspective. Some important details to know. Firstly, the opening is really good. Quote, Foxy's yellow eyes glowed in the darkness of the room, his jaw hung open, flashing sharp teeth. Foxy lifted his hook and slashed its sharp tip in front of Pete's face, the hook whizzing by his nose. Pete rolled off the bed, his body shaking, his stomach pitched as he lay helpless on the floor, and Foxy pivoted, looming over him. The shifting of gears filled the room as Foxy swung open with his hook. You can be a pirate, but first you'll have to lose an arm. No, Pete breathed. When Foxy slammed his hook down into Pete's eye, an audible pop sounded. Blood poured from his eye socket as Pete screamed. End quote. And then it jumps straight to how it all started. Now, the reason I mentioned that quote is because of how Foxy's detailed, showing that this is Foxy and then Pete, so these two characters are the main focus of this book specifically, and they're trying to connect these two characters as important in Five Nights at Freddy's. Then we learn about Pete and Chuck being brothers, Pete being the older brother and their parents got separated, and the mother was, as Pete says, quote, in her own world. This gave us the idea that this family is already broken, parents barely caring about their kids. Pete, an older brother, is left to take care of his little brother Chuck. We learn throughout the book that Pete had to babysit Chuck because of mother's work and their father leaving them. I would like to point out that yes, the story in the books doesn't exactly give away everything. It doesn't connect A with B. I mean, why would it? But it answers some of the most complicated elements for the game universe. Now, to summarize the story, we get Foxy's quote in Pete's head all the time. Their parents' complicated relationship and separation consequences. Pete to deal Chuck, and Chuck to deal with Pete, friends banter, etc. But the main point here is that Pete does the same thing we see in FNAF 4, except this time we're getting a bit more backstory to him. He does make up for what he did with his little brother in this book, unlike FNAF 4's Michael, but his fate here was far more shocking, which was death. We'll get to that in just a sec. Now that we got all the necessary points in mind, let's try to connect as to why, who, and what. To start off, Foxy's masked bro in FNAF 4 had a little brother, Crying Child. It was his party for the little one, and Big Bro wanted to scare him just for the gags. Prank gone too far, bite happened, but what's also worth mentioning is that both these kids seemed so used to not having their parents around, and it was obvious that Big Bro was supposed to babysit him, and this party was to make him feel better. Exactly how Pete and Chuck's life was portrayed. I would like to add my spin on this. I haven't seen anyone else talk about this in specific. I know it may not be as big deal, but I believe that Mrs. Afton in the game universe is still alive. Well, at least she was alive up until the FNAF 4 party, and the Big Bro was regularly, alongside his little brother, was meeting her, which is why when William finally got the kids together for the party, his work which drove his own wife, Mrs. Afton, away, caused another member of his family to leave, this time from the world. Hence, he did everything he could to get him back, kind of parallel to Henry, except Henry's story is far more empathetic. But that's not all. Chuck was never supposed to get closer to any animatronics. Even in the books, it was Pete that started all this. Pete, whose connection to Foxy was so obviously revealed in the beginning of the book. He felt bad. He felt bad for doing that to Chuck, realizing it's gone too far, except in FNAF 4, it did go too far for a crying child, for the little one. But here, it went too far, other way. For Pete. As Matpat also pointed out, one of the most important evidence to back this theory, and that is chewing gum, which the book mentions over and over again for Pete, which was then connected to Survival's logbook, one of my favorite, which revealed that the book belonged to one named Mike. Important detail. Then later, in one of the bad habits you would like to break section, it was revealed, and I quote, chewing gum excessively. Scott doesn't do things random like this. If chewing gum was mentioned in logbook as haha moment randomly, sure, I can see that happening there. But later, being used as a fundamental characteristic for Pete in a book that is supposed to be focused around Foxy and an older brother, and survival book was all about Foxy and Mike. That ain't no coincidence. Now in the book, the twist at the end, which I end up loving, is that Pete, even after losing an iron arm, was alive. He was alive to enforce an earlier point that his mother made, telling Pete that it's a good thing regarding organ donation. At the beginning of the book, he called this whole thing from his mother, and I quote, dumb idea, only for him to be at the mercy of the same concept, organ donation. And where else we heard using organs? That is right, William Afton. Pete was supposed to die, but he's still alive. And where else we heard an older brother? You guessed it, Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. In the Springtrap cutscene, Mike says to his father, quote, I should be dead, but I'm not. That wasn't the only thing that stood out to me. His voice was much older than if you were to compare it with like Crying Child, enforcing the idea that Mike was an older person, not a little child. Pete was older too in the book. Also, in the book, it was never mentioned that Pete's soul was trapped in Foxy, rather in his own body, a useless body. And in the games, Mike's soul was never trapped in Foxy. It was revealed after FNAF 6, and where else have we seen useless bodies being used? Animatronics by William himself. Why am I saying William and connecting with organs and Michael? I'll get to that in just a second, but in the logbook, Foxy was everywhere. In Night 1, Night 2, beginning the end, he was featured more heavily than any other animatronic in that book, and it belonged to one named Mike. The spirit that was talking in the book, do you remember your name, and the party was for you, does he still talk to you? These lines were written by the same colored pen or whatever as was Mike's name in that book. It was written for his little brother, learned in FNAF 4. FNAF's sister location, it was the Aftermath. So not only we can confirm that Michael Afton, son of William Afton, was Foxy Mask bro, but also that he was the big bro of the crying child and responsible for the bite. Hence he felt bad. But also that in between sister location and after the bite from FNAF 4, he was trying to do what he and his father promised the child after the bite, before the crying child's death, of putting him back together, which both father and son did after the party. It worked for baby in sister location, but in the process, Michael lost himself and got scooped, turning purple, which was again hinted in the book to even clarify and confirm more. And that is just the tip of the ice. So now, not only William lost his wife, his little son crying child, but also Mike and a little girl. Circus baby, she is no little girl that she was before the ice cream event. This at least helps us in solving one major element. Scott has been reiterating this story in specific. When community turned from Mike to Mike Victim to Cassidy to Dream Theory, this book, after all these years, is getting us back to solving this theory the way it was supposed to be. Which means we were always right. It's just that now that we got this confirmation, we're one step closer, no pun intended, in solving this never-ending theory of Five Nights at Freddy's. seriously, this is insanity. These books, people are not paying that much attention to them, but they are providing some of the most important lore elements. I may have to go back and check to see if there were some other big theories that were confirmed that people didn't talk about publicly, but there might be some of that good stuff. So do let me know if we should continue this series, because FNAF is where it all started for this channel. Anyways, I may continue FNAF Full Explained series as I did part 1 and then left other parts to collect dust now that we got books and stuff. Also bendy theories just like this one coming soon. We're also getting some Dark Deception reveal in the future, and I'm planning Little Nightmares 2 videos. So 2020 is going to be packed for us. All of these goodies. Join us now on our quest for 40k. We're at 36k right now, 37k. We're getting close to it, boys. Let's do this.